Give them a warm round of applause.
You can.
So, if you could please give us the full spiel about who you are and what you do, and
Sure.
please.
And that ecosystem thing.
Let it rip.
I'm Matt Dunne.
Yes.
I am the founder and executive director of the Center on Rural Innovation. We do digital economy ecosystem building in rural communities. So communities smaller than York.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Nick, and I'm with Innovation Collective, founded it as the idea to turn small communities into research and development labs. That's little kids all the way up to senior citizens. There's a lot of education, parties, festivals. We run 70 events per year in the cities. And then we build work-live places, new bars, all sorts of fun stuff. But with the primary focus of all the citizens not scaling companies, but actually playing in that research and development space for all the big Fortune 1000 companies.
Fantastic. So, where did you get your start with Innovation Collective? How did you begin that? And tell us a little bit about where
Occupy
your place.
movement, actually. I'm 36, and Occupy was the first time I saw that capitalism was wobbly. That's how I like to describe it. I still think it's the best system in the world, but it to me was, I had missed the dot-com bust. I was graduating high school, wasn't really paying attention. The 80s housing crisis, I was in a home as a small baby. And when I saw that the system wasn't quite working right, and the answers for it were, well, just give us jobs or more money, and then it became this conversation about universal basic income. And then it was the big, capitalists going, how do we solve this? It felt very tense, which to me was like, oh, there's an awesome business opportunity right there if you can get that angst on both sides to find a match. So started to unpack the idea that how can I leverage all the relationships I had built across the US with big corporations to help them to start mentor, the little guy, and then get the little guy to get out of his tent at the Occupy movement and say, hey, let's start thinking about creative solutions. We found through our research and kind of experiments, the 70 events per year create an aggressive pattern, and we're very distinct about how we run them, but it gets the citizens to start to have what we like to call confidence in nonsense, and then they start to help each other be nonsensical. And we discovered, not that dissimilar to the Techstars model, that if you give a distinct focus on vertical, then all the citizens kind of fall in line to create around that.
Great. And Matt, how did the Rural Center for Innovation come about? And could you tell us a little bit about the place where it is?
Sure. So the Center on Rural Innovation is based in Heartland, Vermont. You couldn't make that up, but it is right in Heartland, Vermont. And it's the town where I grew up. So I grew up in Vermont, went off to college, got involved in politics straight out of college, and then joined a software company that had been founded in Wilder, Vermont, not much bigger than Heartland. And we grew it to a global company serving the commercial printing industry with 100 employees and sold for twice its revenue. And so it didn't seem like a strange idea that you could actually build a successful tech company in the middle of a rural place. I went off, I was then brought on by the Clinton administration to head up the AmeriCorps Vista program, doing the first Bridging the Digital Divide initiatives on a national scale with people like Steve Case and others. Came back, served 2 terms in the state Senate, and then was recruited by Google to start their community affairs program from scratch in 2007. And they asked me how soon I could move to California, and I said never. And they took them a little while to get over that, but eventually they let us open an office in White River Junction, Vermont, which had been a dying railroad town. It is now a really interesting, cool, hip, small place. So we did that for 8.5 years, building out the community affairs program and Google Fiber and other initiatives. And then tried to get back into politics. 2016 was not the year for me to do that. Right. But on the far side, I got an appointment at the MIT Media Lab and started looking at the landscape of what was happening in America economically, particularly since the recession. And we are now facing the largest opportunity gap in our nation's history between urban and rural places. It is significantly pronounced, and specifically since 2008. And for those of you who haven't read Friedman's new book, Thank You for Being Late, Tom Friedman's new book, I highly recommend it because it actually talks about the acceleration in technology that really started taking off in 2007. The recession hit, so everyone got distracted with whether the market was going to survive, but yet the automation continued on its trajectory and had effects that we are just seeing now, or we're catching up with now. So with the support of Reid Hoffman and the Siegel Family Endowment, we launched the Center on Rural Innovation specifically to try to create digital economy ecosystems in micropolitan areas across the country. We have a pilot in Springfield, Vermont, which is your quintessential post-manufacturing rural community in crisis. Had been the machine tool capital of the country, highest per capita income in the state of Vermont for 40 years, was on Hitler's bomb list, as with York. So there is an alliance, but just cratered when they didn't transition out of that industry effectively, and when it left a big hole. But they had also built, in the meantime, gigabit speed internet to the home. Didn't know necessarily what to do with it, but the local telephone company said, this is what we need to do for the future. They built it out. There's 10 gigabit access symmetrically to every building and community in a town where there's 1 million square feet of beautiful industrial space that's empty, and you can buy a slate-roofed 4-bedroom home for $50,000. So we're starting that process there, the pilot there, with the support of the Kauffman Foundation, the EDA RIS program represented here, funded the project as well. We've been doing a lot of mapping of data, and it was great to see the work that's being done across the board on trying to just surface where there is opportunity. So we got funding from the MasterCard Foundation, Walmart Foundation, and Schmidt Futures to do a rural opportunity map. And then we've also been working now for the last 5 months with the EDA and a cooperative agreement to bring that kind of capacity building work to 8 additional rural places across the country. So that is our portfolio of work. And
I want to point out too, when Matt left Google, how are they doing now when it comes to their community affairs? So just if you understand the power of this man.
Well, so I'd be really interested to understand what you look at when you're going into a rural community. What are the elements that are missing that when you see a community that is precluded from growth?
So let me try it in the affirmative first.
Okay. What
we look for, and Nick and I have talked a lot about this, and we look for sometimes different things, but they are both necessary. So the 3 things we've been looking for are gigabit speed internet to the home, and Springfield is not alone in rural places who've gone and done that. In fact, there is 10 million people in rural America who have world-class fiber-to-the-home internet connectivity. And it's this untold story, because what it was is the municipal electric companies and cooperative electric companies and the small telephone companies that brought services when no one would go to rural, 100 years ago, that are just building it because they can. They don't. They have long-term view. Fiber will last a long time. So we look for that. We look for a 30-minute drive time to a 4-year selective college or university campus for both tech transfer, talent, but also trailing spouse value for anyone who's been involved with a university, particularly in a smaller area. The ability to retain faculty is really, really dependent on their spouse finding something aspirational to be able to do. And the third is we're looking for places that are in opportunity zones. Because we believe that's going to be the fastest way to get follow-on investment. So the 8 communities that we're working with, plus Springfield, almost to a community fulfill all three of those pieces.
Great.
And then you evaluate leadership. But
Yeah. So it's interesting. So Matt's approach, he is very analytical and does a fantastic job at doing that. We're awful at working with grants. So if any of you want to give us grants, we're not your people. But what we do is we focus heavily on the research and development capital. We've realized that there's hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars being lit on fire every year by the Fortune 1000. And our belief is that we can move that out of their big corporations and give it to people who are untrained, uneducated, change their own oil, and teach the town how to play together and create nonsensically and focus on the needs of a big brand. And it sounds like Super Mary Poppins, but we've seen significant breakthroughs in industry with this. And we have private jets flying out from Fortune 5 companies. We have a Fortune 10 that put $60 million into one of our companies in a city of 40,000 for non-dilutive, no debt. They just spun off a $400 million joint venture. And so it's happening. And these are founded by people who are growing up on Indian reservations. So our main belief is that humans are humans everywhere. Meaning that we all kind of want the same thing, and it's all collapsed across the world for the most part. And we've put our event system together to try and figure out how do we drag that out of people. Then we realized they want to, like the quality of what makes them come alive. Then we realized they want to eat and drink and laugh and play and work and create together. So now we're building these co-work, co-live, college, barbershop, bar, behind a bookshelf kind of complexes that we fill up because they need to live somewhere. And then we go after the big corporate players and say, look, you have this town that we've built around space, or we're doing one that's equine right now for horses, Horsetown. And we're going to pump out a bunch of ideation and talent that's around this vertical. You should pay attention, come do think tanks here, and we kind of broker those partnerships. And then we work with education to restructure it. So the main thing we look for is there has to be people alive there. And then beyond that, that there's some belief system by a group in the town that they want something more. And if that's a consistent theme, then we can build off of that. Based on the size of the city, we decide how invested we are. Some governments retain us, and we come in and run a 5-year process to turn a town around. Other times it's real estate where people bring us properties. We have yet to have a brand pick a city and deploy us with capital first. But much like Techstars, that's kind of our long tail game, is to, I have a whole plan to get rid of UBI, and it'll be fun. But our colleges help for sure. But really it's a matter of a collective group where there's at least some people who have this coalition of the willing, and every town has that. So you can see by our map, we're in 9 communities, and there is no rhyme or reason to our places. Like one's literally an island, like an actual physical island, and then another one's a city of 2,000 people on a lake. Well, I guess there's water. That's the other thing too.
Well, I think there needs to be a sense of place that's owned by the people who are there. I mean, I think that's totally. Absolutely critical. What's interesting for us as we've been doing this work is we put out this call after we got the assignment to go and try to bring additional rural communities into this mix, and specifically to be able to apply for EDA funding moving forward, because there had been so few small communities that had just gone ahead and applied even if they were ready. And we had 130 communities sign up for our webinar on 2 weeks' notice on December 20th. So there was something going on, and we actually had to narrow it down from there. And part of our narrowing down was, frankly, the communities that clearly had been thinking about this for a number of years, had put together that group of unassigned leadership. So the people, I mean, and if you're in a small community, people are wearing 100 different hats, and they're just figuring out, but they were actually solving it. And in fact, the fiber to the home is actually not a bad proxy for cohesion within a community, because it wasn't because some incumbent said, oh, I really want to put fiber to the home in Emporia, Kansas. It was a couple entrepreneurs who just figured it out, brought the community together, got all local investment, and are now delivering world-class broadband. So it's it's a nice proxy for they can come together and
Yeah.
create capacity.
That's great. I know in Pennsylvania we have Comcast as a very large corporation based here.
Heard
So
of them.
we, there are rules in place about who is able to build fiber to the home per se. But you know, one of the things here we have United Fiber and Data building their distributed or geographically distributed pipeline between New York and Ashburn, and Ashburn, Virginia, the data capital of the world. And that was all funded by local families who said, we know that we need to have this.
Sure.
We need to have this to be able to compete in the future. So that is a good proxy, I think.
There's capacity is willing to give a long view, right? Not to live in the past, but to say we're driving forward.
Yeah. Just for reference, what are the sizes of populations that you're actually working with?
So we're working with communities between 8,000 and 45,000.
Okay.
That are not urban. So they have to be in communities that usually in the aggregate, even with the surrounding communities, are still less than 100,000.
Okay.
So small, I would say Wilson, North Carolina, that's one of them, is about 45,000. Springfield, Vermont, where we're starting this, is 9,000 people. Emporia, Kansas, I think is about 25,000. So it's in that range. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you impact an ecosystem of that size and are able to leverage jobs into that community, it has a very large cumulative effect to the overall area.
And that's what we love about this. Is some folks were asking us, well, how many jobs do you think would really be a turning point for this community? And I said 40. Right? You get 40 people who are working, even if they're working distributedly, because we're doing entrepreneurship on one side, and then we're doing distributed tech talent on the other, and then training. And we've been working, at least in conversation with Flatiron, to be able to figure out how to bring some of that capacity to these communities. And we do believe in creating a density, even in rural places. And Nick has one of the most epic examples of a place to aggregate and to pull people together to do
The Den?
tech, the Den, to do tech, to do scotch tasting,
Cigars,
it's amazing.
Robots.
But creating that
fun.
place for a center of gravity to have the virtuous collisions that we all know from research is important can happen in a small community if you do it intentionally.
Yeah.
And you create that social connections that people will come out and.
Our property, we get 2 times the average rent in the city, and we have 0 occupancy issues. So we're at 100%. And all the commercial real estate people thought I was crazy when we went after it. And a lot of it had to do with the model we use to kind of pre-build the community first. So it's not a you will build it, they will come. It doesn't work that way. But yeah, I think just on the theme of building ecosystems in small communities, I'll just say emphatically, find the coalition of the willing and start working. Just because you guys are here for that purposefully, that's why you came here. There are people, like Matt was talking about, that are already doing really good things in each of these towns, and gather them purposefully and consistently. Like start getting together, set some real goals, and start hacking at them. And if you can use resources that are from structured grants, use them. If you can't, be super scrappy. Like nothing can stop you. We have watched Walmart, Boeing, Autodesk, Foxconn, Samsung, BOE, all these companies flying in and out of these little itty bitty cities, where we started with getting citizens together and saying, let's start telling stories of success, and then figure out how we can get you some seed funding. And a lot of it came from the private sector. And then it's like, oh, you want an office? Let's build something. And then a big monocle wearing developer was like, well, I'll build a building. And then it's like, all right, let's talk about that. And you find a way to just build little by little if you have to, or if you're in a community where there are a lot of resources, or you can leverage grants effectively and you're smarter than I am, then go do that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for being here.